Here we go. I'll be back here. And we are off. Like I said, the first thing we're going to be doing is foam rolling. We're going to start with foam rolling our mid back, our upper back. So we've got our foam rollers. They're going right on the ground. Let's see here. And you are just laying right over the top of it, between the shoulder blades and the thoracic spine. The thoracic spine is just the area that all your ribs attach to. And we're just trying to get a little massage, a little mobility in the area between your shoulder blades. And now, what you can do to maybe get a little bit more tissue exposed is give yourself a nice big hug. And you're just going to be going up and down, maybe 10 to 15 reps. And then we're going to do a little bit more mobility work for your thoracic spine by extending over the back. You know, I got to say, if there's one thing from today's session that you take and you do over and over, let's make it be this or a hip flexor stretch, okay? If you need to break up your sitting, which we all do, every 30 minutes or so, foam rolling a couple times up and down your back is going to feel pretty good. All right, so I've sat my butt down, get my shirt out of here so I don't choke. And now I'm going to support my neck. Because a lot of people say, oh, this is really stressful. We got, you know, big brains and big skulls, and we got to really support them with all these small neck muscles that get tired. So instead of having those muscles do the work, because it's not neck and shoulder day, you can put your hands underneath your neck and just arch back over the top. And if you don't have a foam roller, just hang out. Do what feels good. Maybe you want to do some cats and camels, although we're going to get to those in a second here. Maybe you just want to work on your breathing. And we're just doing 10. I think we've got 2 left. And I'm letting my ribs flare a little bit. I'm okay during this exercise with my ribs coming up. That's going to come back a little bit later. We don't want to be doing this with a ton of our exercises, like the top of our deadlift or overhead pressing, that kind of thing. Okay, so we're going to take the foam roller, and now we're going to now we're going to be foam rolling our quads. I'll back up a little bit so you can see me. And now it's just going horizontal to your quad. Maybe start it right in the middle of your thigh. I have my other foot down to help support, and I'm just going up and down. Same thing, like 10 times. Do all that running and walking. Even some of the sitting can make these muscles tighten up a little bit if we're not using them through big ranges of motion. And once again, if you don't have your foam roller, you're just hanging out, maybe you're doing a hip flexor stretch, maybe you're stretching out your hamstrings. We're going to be doing all of that again, but it doesn't hurt to do it a little bit on your own. We'll say that was 10. And with foam rolling, if you haven't heard me say it before, foam rolling is just providing a different type of stretch to your muscles. Typically when we stretch, say take my quads for instance, when we stretch our quads, we stretch them in a linear fashion with the fibers of the muscle. And the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs, these things that sense that stretch, send the signal to our brain and our spinal cord, and then it tells the muscle to relax and we can stretch it. But when we go horizontally, or when we provide just surface pressure that stretches 360 degrees around that area, all the foam roll and talk at the same time, and it provides what we call a novel stimulus to the area. It's something new, and the brain kind of doesn't know what to do with it. It definitely knows it's stretching, and so it tells it to relax, but sometimes it can be a more effective stretch than just linearly stretching. It also moves some blood around. You know, it generally can feel pretty good. But it's not breaking up adhesions, it's not breaking up scar tissue, it's not reforming your connective tissue, it's not, you know, restructuring your fascia. The amount of pressure and time you would have to do this for is like astronomical. And so it's not doing any of those things, but it can help your nervous system kind of relax a little bit so you can gain and use some more range of motion, which we're gonna be doing in a second. But for now, we're going to put this aside. We're going to be using this new quad length all the way at the end. We're going to keep working it into what we're doing throughout. But we're going to go back to the thoracic spine. We're going to go back to mobilizing the area of our spine that gets the most tight or most immobile as we're sitting around like this all day. Does this look familiar? Because I looked at myself in the mirror the other day and I was like, oh, I guess I'm falling into that same trap. And guess what? It was about a half hour. I stood up, I stretched out my pecs, I stretched out my hip flexors, and I was back at it. And I've started to do these stretches with my clients when I'm doing my telehealth sessions. They don't mind. It's all good. They know that I'm just like everybody else and need my breaks. So we're going to be doing cats and camels, except we're going to be doing the top of the back and the bottom of the back separately. So we're going to do our thoracic spine and our lumbar spine because we want to have good control and good mobility in both those areas. So we can express good length, so we can make great rotation. We can't just say, oh, we need to focus everything on the thoracic spine because the lumbar spine does need to move as well. But we're going to get our hands underneath our shoulders, and if you have any wrist pain, you can drop down here too. That's okay, not a problem. But I want you to focus first on the area between your shoulder blades, that thoracic spine that we rolled out, or maybe you just did a couple of regular cats and camels earlier. You're going to push up and drop down between your shoulder blades. You push up and you drop down between your shoulder blades, and we're just kind of working that thoracic spine area. And my low back is going to move a little bit when I do these, but the focus is between the shoulder blades. So I'm pushing up, I'm dropping down. I got to get my head to move too. Push up, drop down. And we're going to go 3 more, and then we're just going to focus on our low back. And if you're having trouble kind of feeling it, what you can do is you can sit back on your heels and put your hands here and just try to do some of these. And that's going to make you focus on your upper back. But I like these for today. Makes you have to use your brain a little bit more. I got 1 more. All right. Now we're going to move to the lumbar spine. We're just tucking and tilting. Anterior pelvic tilt and posterior pelvic tilt. We need to have ownership of both of these moves, or doing anything athletic is going to be kind of troublesome because we need to be able to control the anterior portion of our trunk with that posterior pelvic tilt and the posterior back of our trunk with the anterior pelvic tilt. We're spilling soup out the back of our pelvis, and we're spilling soup out the front, okay? So if you think about your pelvis like a bowl of soup, you're spilling it out the front, you're spilling it out the back, and you're always expressing control, okay? So we're not just, twerking. I think I labeled one of these things a twerk the other week, and a couple of people got some good laughs at this, but we really want to express control, and if, twerking is your thing, this will help. I guess maybe we'll reduce your likelihood of injury if you show good control of that range. Can't have those dance floor injuries. Although I've seen it, I've treated it. All right. Okay, so we're still going to stick within the thoracic spine and mobilizing that upper back area because of because hashtag sitting, right? We're sitting so much in this rounded position. We get this thing called tendinous creep where those muscles that are elongated kind of start hitting save on the button, and this becomes our baseline position. This is not good for our breathing. It's not good for our exercising. It can cause, I don't want to say it can cause pain, but it can cause you to move differently in that your shoulders, putting your arms above your head becomes more difficult, and then we strain our rotator cuff and our bicep tendon, and that stuff causes pain. Okay, so we're going to do a trunk rotation. It's called a T. You'll see why. Lateral trunk rotation. So I got my arms out to the side like a big T. I got my legs up in 90-90 position. Okay? My head is down. And I'm going to rock as far as I can while keeping my opposite shoulder down. So when you watch this shoulder, when I go the opposite way, if this shoulder starts coming up here, I've gone too far. It's a self-limiting exercise. So I can only go as far as my shoulder will let me. And it might be different side to side, and that's okay. It's just something to make note of. Maybe you want to do a little bit more pec stretching on that side. And we're going to go for 8 on each side. I think this will be 3. And 3. Oh, and this is the control you want. You don't want to fly through this. You want to make your muscles, your nervous system, all that stuff show control. Show that you have a combination of mobility and stability within the system. So if you're just crashing side to side, you're not showing me that you have good stability or good control of your parts. You're showing me that gravity can do a good job. And we're just gently and easily breathing. Should be able to talk while you do this, shouldn't be strenuous. We're going to stay on our backs here in a second. We're going to start going after our hamstrings, our calves, and our sciatic nerves, all with one exercise. I think this is my last one to the left. All right. Scoot back a little bit. Okay. And you're going to be on your back. You're going to hug behind one knee now. And so we're going to be stretching, or we're going to be using our quad to actively stretch our hamstring and our calf. And then at the very end, we're going to pull our toes back to tension our sciatic nerve. We're telling our sciatic nerve that, hey, it's okay if you have a little bit of tension. So maybe you've had a little bit of the numbness or tingling or burning in your heel, and maybe you thought it was, plantar fasciitis. But you do this, and it lights up the bottom of your foot, and you're like, oh, maybe it's something else. Well, maybe it's your sciatic nerve. Maybe it's, that going down the back of your leg. When you put some tension into it, it screams back at you. But that's okay if you gradually do it. You don't want to pound it into submission, but you want to kind of coax it into accepting what you're about to get. So you're going to straighten out your leg as much as you possibly can. So you're going to keep your toes pointed as you do that. And then when you're at the top, you're going to pull your foot back. And you should feel more of a stretch in your calf, and you might feel a little bit lower, maybe even a little higher. And then you point your toes, and you bend. And this is the pace you're going. We're going 10 on each side. So straighten as much as you can and pull the toes back. And this should leave you feeling pretty good by the end of it. If you're really having trouble with pulling your toes back, just forget about that part and just keep stretching out the hamstring and the calf by moving your leg up. I think I got 3 more. 8. I'm using that quad that we foam rolled earlier. And we're switching. Toes are pointed, leg goes up, toes come back. And you should, as you get warmed up and go through this, be able to go a little bit farther by the end than where you started. Gotta say, this feels pretty good. So when we sit all day, not only do our hip flexors stay shortened, but our hamstrings and our calves do as well. A lot of people forget about that. And I know I have a lot of emphasis on hip flexor stretching, but the hamstrings and calves need some love too. So we can't forget about those. 2 more. I can definitely feel a difference on both sides as I did those. Now, we're going to start using our hip flexors, okay? We know that using your hip flexors is a great way to get them to actually relax a little bit, because when we sit with them shortened all day, they kind of forget what they're supposed to do, and they just tighten up and tighten up and tighten up. But if we tell them when to turn on, when we tell them when to turn off, we can use that off period, or the refractory period, what it's called, to then stretch them out. So we're going to do some dead bugs, and then we're going to do a hip flexor / quad stretch after that. That's what this blue mat is for. So we're going to be on our backs. We're going to go one arm back, the opposite leg goes back. And then we come back to the start and switch. A lot of times when people are doing these, they say, Mike, should I peg my back down to the floor? And the answer is actually no. We don't want to flatten our spine and push ourselves into more flexion. We want to brace your trunk so you have a little bit of lumbar lordosis, but you're nice and stable in your trunk. And now this is where I don't want you to try to create that little arch and flare your ribs. Your ribs should stay down, but you should still have a little bit of that lordosis in your spine, a little bit of extension in your spine. But you shouldn't be flattening and you shouldn't be extending, okay? There should be no movement occurring in your low back. And we're gonna go for about 10 more on each side. It's a lot of them. We wanna really get those hip flexors working, get your obliques, your abdominals, all the shoulder musculature, your lats and your pecs are working during these. They hit a lot of muscles. It's more than just an ab exercise. You got 2 more on each side. And now it's time to stretch our hip flexors this is quickly becoming known as my favorite exercise and stretch. We're gonna pop one knee down. This is great. I think weeks ago I showed people that you can actually do your work in this position, and it stretches out your hip flexor, keeps you upright. It's a little bit easier to keep your screen at eye level, and then you can just type away. But here you can tuck your big toes under because we know that influences your ankle, your knee, your hip, and your back. So you're stretching out the fascia at the bottom of your foot, maybe even the muscles, the joints. You're gonna tuck your pelvis into that posterior pelvic position, tilt position, excuse me. You're upright, and then you're stretching, getting a stretch in the front of your hip. If you don't get that, do the old little foot grab and try to pull it into your butt. You don't want to get that by arching your back. We don't want to create more compression in our lumbar spine. We don't want to be nice and tall. And you want to be stretching out the front. We got about 45 more seconds here. Just breathing, nice and easy, okay? This is not something that you should be breathing heavily through. Because if you are, it tells me that you're a little bit stressed. Your central nervous system is perceiving a threat, and you're not going to be able to lengthen the tissue in the front of your leg and in your hip. If that's the case, just back away and just keep this stretch going with your foot, there you go, toe stuck, your foot down, pushing your hip forward but not leaning back. About 15 seconds left. Just chilling, just breathing. Got a lot of work to go. But it's going to wake up the little muscles in your back that surround your spine, the spinal stabilizing system, the deep spinal stabilizing system. Not necessarily your quadratus, not your obliques, not your abs. Talk about the little guys, the rotatories and the longissimus and the iliacus and all that jazz. Not your iliacus, that's a hip flexor. I'll have to check my anatomy books here. But we have these little muscles that rotate our spine, that stabilize our spine, that sense stretching in our spine. That's the only role. But we need to fire them every once in a while. And sitting on our asses all day isn't going to cut it. That's not going to do it. So we need to kind of give them that feedback. Toes tucked, pelvis tucked, upright. There we go. It's not a balance exercise. So if you need something to hold on to, be my guest. You're just hanging out. Stretching out the front of the leg. If you can get your heel up like this, great. If you can't, great. That means it's, you're where you need to be. And that's all stretching is. Very, very individualized. Everybody has their sweet spot for stretching. My stretch doesn't have to look like yours and vice versa. But you do want to be upright. There's some principles that we want to maintain. We don't want to compress our spine. You don't want to be slouched in this. You want to be able to breathe. Those things stay true for everybody. But we're all shaped a little bit differently. We all have a little bit different tone in our muscles. Maybe you just went for a long run, and typically you can do this, but maybe your quads are really full of blood and fired up, and you just hang out and just stretch out your hip flexor by keeping your foot on the ground. It's all good. Keep looking at my watch and losing my balance. Okay. And we're going to start going through 2 exercises that can help wake up those deep spinal stabilizing systems that I was just telling you about. The first one is side lying. And typically when I have you side lie, it's for a side plank, which we'll do a little bit later. And I have your hips and knees bent. kind of like 45 degrees where your heels are in line with your butt, but that's not going to be the case right now. You're actually, let's see if I can line this up for you. You're going to line your thighs up with your torso, okay? But your knees are going to be bent to 90 degrees. So we're having to fire our hamstrings a little bit. We're expressing length in our quads and our hip flexors a little. And from here, you're going to tilt your pelvis. So you're not just going through hip internal and external rotation. You're not just lifting your feet. You're actually going to roll your pelvis forward. Now I'm going to rest my head here in a second while I do the next 7 of them. So we're doing 8 on each side. Keeping myself in alignment, and I'm rotating my pelvis, but my shoulders are staying upright. So I'm actually getting thoracic rotation by moving my pelvis, by moving my lumbar spine and my legs. So I'm working on thoracic rotation again, while waking up the deep spinal stabilizing system. You want to go as far as you can with control. And one more. All right. Feels pretty good. My back feels great when I do that. And once again, maybe you see that you can't go as far on one side as you can on the other. And that's okay. It just tells us that you kind of have to work on one side of your body more than the other. Trying to feed a little bit of symmetry into the body. Not everything has to be done on both sides. Remember, we're trying to rotate our pelvis and our hips. So we're working hip internal and external rotation mobility as well, in a really easy position to do that in, which is your leg here. You can easily internally and externally rotate your hips. But we're adding a little bit of pelvic rotation. We need to get that rotation in our in our thoracic spine. We better get used to this position because we're going to do the same exercise but on our stomachs here in a second. One more. Maybe you're getting a little bit of cramping in your quadratus lumborum. It's muscle in the back that sits right above your belt line. That's okay. That guy doesn't get a lot of use throughout the day and is sometimes unfamiliar when we call it into action. So the next exercise is like literally the same exercise except you're laying on your belly. You're going to be windshield wiping your legs and your pelvis. We're going to be firing up all the same muscles except we're going side to side. We have to incorporate larger excursions of movement. The floor is what's going to keep you in a little bit of hip extension. You're going to keep your chest down on the floor. I'll try to figure out the best angle for this. I believe it's going to be here. You're on your belly, your knees are together and your feet are together. And then you're trying to rotate your feet down to the floor. 90-degree bend at your knees, and then the other direction. Keeping your shoulders, chest, and elbows down on the floor. 8 to each side. So I've done 1, 2. And I actually want to turn my head and look at my feet if I can. Lots of rotation, waking everything up deep within my abdomen, next to my spine, the muscles that connect my vertebrae. Two more on each side. Last one. And we're done with those. Your spine is awake. Well, your spine is always awake. We're just trying to emphasize the little guys to fire maybe a little bit more, which these exercises have been shown to do. We're going to go to the back of the hip now. We spent a lot of time stretching the front, spent a lot of time on the thoracic spine, got the hamstrings and the calves. Now we're going to move up the chain a little bit more. We're going to stretch out your glutes and hip rotators, and then we're going to put it all together with some side planks and some 90-90 hip extensions. Those are going to be the hardest ones of the day, most likely, but I'll give you some variations if they're a little too difficult. But for now, you're going to get into your pigeon pose, okay? So here you are, you got your front leg almost perpendicular, does not have to be perpendicular. And if this for some reason is bothersome to your knee, you can just pop onto your back, pull your leg over, and this is where you stop. You still feel a stretch on the back of your hip here, but that's not where the rest of us are going to go. So we're in pigeon pose, we got our back leg straight. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the pigeon pose here, where we're just flexed. But if I can flex and also side bend a little bit, I can stretch out my lats and my quadratus lumborum, which both can get very tight and cause a little bit of discomfort in our back if they're not working well. So I want to be able to lengthen them and have them express a little bit more length. By going into a pigeon pose, so we're going to be stretching out our glute with this. And then, so it's my right side. I'm going to take my hands out in front, and I'm going to lean over to the right. So I'm going to stretch out my right glute, but my left QL and my left lat, and we are stuck here for a minute. So you just relax your head. Like I said, this is uncomfortable on your knee or your back. Just pop onto your back and do a nice little piriformis stretch. Breathing deeply, maybe creeping your hands over to the side a little bit to get a little bit more stretch after a couple seconds. We're halfway through here. Just feel a big stretch on the left side of my torso and my right posterior hip, going crazy right now. If you've been doing a lot of squats or deadlifts or jumping, maybe you do some crab walks with some rubber bands, those things are all gonna use those glutes and the hip rotators. You're probably feeling a big old stretch the back of your hip. And we're gonna switch, or maybe you've been doing a lot of pull-ups and deadlifts, and those are gonna tighten your back up a little bit. We gotta remind them what it means to be long. Hanging out 1 minute onto the left side of my hip and the right side of my torso, stretching those lats, make sure I'm breathing. I'm not overstressing my body. I know that the right side of my shoulder and my torso is a little tighter than my left, so I back off a little bit. Making sure you're relaxing your hips so you can sink into that posterior hip more. You got about 15 seconds left. You want to keep that stretch, that intensity below a 7 out of 10. So it's something you want to do again. And we're done with that. Okay. So we're going to move on. The last two things combine stability, mobility, and flexibility. They kind of put it all together. It's a great opportunity for some motor learning, maybe to recover some movement patterning that might be limited because of our inactive, sedentary lifestyles that we have. An hour of exercise a day is not going to cut it. 1 hour of exercise to combat the 12 to 16 hours of sitting that most of us are doing these days is not going to cut it. So I always encourage you to do things like this throughout your day. I call them movement snacks or movement vitamins. You take them throughout your day, and then you don't have to worry about sitting down and you exercise and then saying, oh man, I need to do a 30 to 40 minute mobility session every day. No, you don't have to do that when throughout your day you've been doing it all and then you feel good. Well, we're going to put together some hip extension, some lat activation, all that spinal control stuff that we were doing with our legs up by going side to side. We're just going to do a regular short side plank. So we're going up on our knees. We've got our heels in line with our butt. You've got your knees in front of your body just a little bit because you're going to come up and push your hips forward. And from here, we are just holding 30 seconds. Now I would love just a straight line from between your thighs up through your chin, or even a little bit above. I'm okay with that, but I don't want you sagging, okay? So you're trying to maintain a straight line or a little bit elevated, and that's great. And we're just breathing and holding it 30 seconds. I'm pulling my shoulder away from my ear, activating my lat, using my shoulder stabilization muscles because we don't just work in like one piece. It's not just your low back. We got to take into consideration what your shoulder's doing and your hip and your ankle. All these things can affect your low back. I just gave you a 43-second side plank on that side. It's a little bit much, a little extra credit for the day. Now we're popping up, pushing the hips forward. I'm squeezing my butt nice and tight. So I'm getting some hip isometrics. I'm working on my obliques and my QL on my bottom side. I'm pulling my shoulder away from my ear. I'm just hanging out 30 seconds. Maybe you can't make it this long. Maybe your shoulder's a little uncomfortable with it. That's cool. You can back out after, 15, 20 seconds and maybe do a couple more reps. Good. You've done your side planks, and now we're going a little bit more complex, a little bit more advanced. Here, we have to use that hip internal and external rotation that we were working with for that little windshield wiper thing we were doing with our back. So I've got one leg in external rotation, bent to 90 degrees. Got the other hip internally rotated, bent to roughly 90 degrees, and I got 90 degrees in front of me between my thighs. And this is a great place to start. If you're having a tough time staying up, you can put your hands behind you a little bit, but we're gonna be going forward because eventually we're gonna stand. So we're gonna need to get into an extended position. So now I'm using hip extension. I'm really stretching out my TFL and my hip flexors on opposing sides. From here, I'm gonna move what's considered my back foot next to my front knee. Scoot back a little bit. So now I'm in half kneeling. Once again, I'm from here. I've got that back foot, the one that's in back, and I move it in line with my opposite knee, and now I'm in half kneeling. From here, I'm having to express lots of hip extension on my down knee. I'm squeezing my glute, I'm tucking my toes. Now I'm standing. Now I've used my glutes and my quads, and now I bring that foot back down, back into half kneeling, getting that stretch. This is very similar to a move you might have seen called the Turkish get-up. It's not part of it, except for the standing, but it's very similar. Getting up, basically getting up off the floor in a series of moves that are very, very sequential, okay? So from here, bring my toes down, bring my knee back. Now I'm back into that hip extended position on both sides. Now back down. Now I'm gonna make 4 more of these, and maybe your brain is being like, Mike, what on earth are you having me do? And if it's just too much right now, maybe the pressure on your knees is too much for that long, maybe you don't have the strength to stand, and those things are okay. Just go into this 90-90 position and just try to get up and control down. And get up and control down. You're still gonna be using your glutes. You're still gonna be extending your hips. We're still using the hip internal and external rotation we worked on before, kind of putting it all together. But if you can, you come up, half kneeling to stand. Back to the half kneel, back to the 90-90 extension and down. And we got 2 more to go on this side. Extension, half kneel, tall. Half kneel, leg comes around, back down with control. And last one on this side, then we switch. We'll see if my brain isn't fried. Okay, so we've done one side. Now we get to do the other. Let's see what we got. So we got all that 90-90 position stuff, and I'm upright. It's actually a little bit harder for me to hang out in this position. It's a little bit more work, so I'm just gonna get it over with. So we go into extension. I'm stretching the front of my hips, going into half kneeling. Let's make sure I'm still in the frame, I'm still framed up, I'm good. And then standing. And we come down, leg comes around, and back down. All right, extension, half kneel, tuck your toes, come up. Takes a little bit of balance when you're making that transition. And really put it all together. We got 2 more left on this side. Butt comes down, utilizing all of the stretch we got from that pigeon. Taking your time. Whoa. We got our last one here. Let's see if I can make a better rep. Yeah, there we go. And you are done.